Welcome to the Boomer Woman's podcast. I'm your host, Agnes Knowles. If you've heard any of my chats with travelers, nomads, expats, you've heard me ask a lot of questions. I always take notes while I'm editing because my guests collectively are going to make me the most prepared traveler ever, whenever that happens. My guest today has a lot of travel experience. Michelle and her husband Jedd are old enough to remember not having all those apps and young enough to figure them out and share the best and most practical with us. And they have figured out how to find great deals on flights, accommodations, as well as how to make the most of your smartphone. So many great tips. So listen in and then be sure to check out their website and browse through their offerings. They even weighed in on great gear and travel hacks. Oh, and I signed up to their mailing list after Michelle and I spoke, and the emails I've been receiving all have great info. Do that too. Listen now. Most of you know I find almost all my guests on the guesting platform I use. I do also receive emails from people who ask if they might be a guest. Two emails caught my attention recently as they both opened by telling me what they enjoyed about a specific previous interview on this podcast. This tells me they are acquainted with what I do and who you, dear listener, are. You heard my chat with Robert last month. Today's guest brings a subject that I personally am really looking forward to. Michelle's website is Intentional Travelers, a name I liked right off the bat. And she and her husband say our site is for people who intentionally pursue meaningful transformation experiences around the world. It's no secret that I intend to become a traveler in the future. So as soon as I wrap my conversation with Michelle today, I'm going over to the website to get on their mailing list. Today, we're talking about a tool that we all have sitting within reach of us right now. An older version of mine once crashed and burned while I was traveling internationally. Not a comfortable feeling at all. Our smartphones are pretty much an appendage these days, and old as I am, I can't remember much about travel before smartphones. Shall we jump in? Michelle Chang, welcome to the Boomer Woman's podcast.
Thank you, Agnes. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm, as I said, looking forward to this one. I love your and Jedd's backstory, how you came to be global digital nomads. Could you share that with our listeners, please?
Sure. Yeah, it's not something that we set out to do. I mean, it didn't even exist when I was growing up, so it's not a career or path that I imagined for myself. But I grew up in Oregon, met my husband here, got married at age 25, and we both started careers in universities working with students, and we loved that. We were thinking about getting a house, and there was something in me that really needed to at least try living abroad before I closed that door. And so we had this kind of quarter life crisis together and decided to do a sabbatical to just try something different. And what we chose to do was the Peace Corps. I know that Canada also has a similar volunteer program, but if anyone's not familiar, the United States government sends folks abroad to select countries to help with volunteer services, share a skill, but really there's three goals and the skill is just one of them. And so the other two goals are all about cross-cultural exchange. And that was so impactful for us. We learned about community development, cultural understanding, and living and working in Jamaica just was quite challenging, but we learned so much that we carry into the rest of our lives. And even though it was meant to be a sabbatical, we just loved living abroad. And that's when we did this experiment to try working online in order to make travel a part of our lifestyle. And so that also was an experiment and it turned out great. We started freelancing, started the travel blog on the side at the time. This was 2014. We had to keep our expenses very minimal because we had just been volunteering for 27 months, so we didn't have much income coming in at the time. But as we were growing our business, we like that first year, we actually spent $0 on accommodations and we got really creative. We were house sitting a lot in Oregon mostly, but when we were traveling, we were doing these kind of outside the box exchanges for accommodations and just being resourceful about flights and other expenses. So it's been now 10 years and our work has shifted. We have shifted to a part time home base. So we live with baby boomers, my parents, half the year. So we have an agreement basically that, we're nomads about half the year and then we're in Oregon together living in this multi-generational household and we're committed to living together as they age. But we're still prioritizing flexibility and travel, at least for this season of our lives, while we're not needed for caretaking or things like that. So these days, yeah, we're kind of doing both. We're working online. My focus with the travel online resources right now is kind of shifting towards helping people not just discover travel beyond the typical vacation, but also how to use the internet and our smartphones so that folks aren't missing out on better travel because they really are great tools.
Okay. Now, I opened by saying that I can barely remember travel before smartphones. You're a young woman. Have you ever traveled without a phone?
Oh, yes. Let's see, my first smartphone was after Peace Corps. So I had started my career, I had gotten married, I had worked for about 8 years and started traveling. I did have a phone when I was studying abroad, but it was a flip phone, and I think that was the first time that I had texted. I remember it was so cumbersome because it was you had to press the buttons for each number. So if you wanted letter C, you had to press the number one 3 times, ABC, to get to the C. And I remember thinking like, I don't, this is not very fun. But yeah, I didn't actually have a smartphone until I was probably 31. So I remember all the different stages of technology. I don't know if you remember MapQuest and having to maybe print out directions.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And my husband was an admission counselor, and so he would travel a lot to different cities with MapQuest, and he's printing off directions and kind of looking down. But if he makes a wrong turn, there's no real time update to tell him where he needs to go next. He has to, hopefully pull over and be safe, and figure that out. But we have a lot more tools now at our disposal. So
Well, and right now I'm feeling so much better about what I call my fat fingers because as I'm texting, I invariably hit the letter beside it or something, and I always have to double check my, what I've typed before I send it. That said, I will also admit that I just checked my last email to you and I totally omitted a letter. So, I mean, what can I say?
no
Ah,
worries.
dear. Okay, why do we need some level of digital phone literacy to travel well nowadays?
I
I
think
mean, besides the
it,
maps.
Yeah, maps are definitely a big one. I think it's becoming more and more important. Even a couple years ago, you could get by keeping your phone disconnected. If you go abroad, maybe you would put it on airplane mode so it's not getting data. But some airlines and even airports have actually done away with paper plane tickets completely. So they only accept digital confirmations. So things like that are kind of moving towards this digital age. I would say they're incredible tools if you think of the way they replace a lot of different things. They don't have to replace these, but like the airplane tickets I mentioned, guidebooks, how we get our information about the destinations, a journal or a notebook. If you're traveling, you might just do that on your phone now. Maps, cash money. I mean, a lot of times we're just paying with our phones or our credit cards. It's our camera, it's our video camcorder, it's our communication device. all in this tiny little thing, and it accesses the biggest library in the world, the internet. So obviously there are pros and cons to technology, and I would never advocate that we spend more time glued to our devices, right? That's not the goal, especially when you're traveling. You want to be present, but you do want to be able to use it as a tool. And I kind of think of it like my husband, when he learned how to use the convection mode on the oven. It's like you don't have to use that, but it really is helpful. Or maybe you have a TV and you can record programs that you want to watch, or you can use the on demand feature. So it just gives you kind of a level up to what you were doing before. And I would say also, especially when you're going somewhere new, and arriving in another country for the first time can be really stressful. The last new place I went was Manila in the Philippines. I'd never been anywhere in the Philippines before, so we show up in the airport. I have no idea where we're going. Everything's unfamiliar. I don't know if people are going to be speaking English. Fortunately, in the Philippines, a lot of people do speak English and a lot of the signs are. But even the foreign exchange rates, I mean, we had just come from Vietnam for a while, so we had gotten adjusted in our head of how to change, that currency. Think about it's almost 25,000 dong to a dollar. So we're like doing that math in our head all the time. But, as soon as we go to a new country, it's totally different. We're tired from the flight, but we immediately have to start making decisions. Or I had done some research on how we were going to get to our hotel. And I found this airport transfer bus. It was very simple. We just had to go to this place outside the airport, buy the ticket, get on the bus, and it would take us very close to our hotel. But we got there and the bus was broken down. It wasn't running. So that was no longer an option. So, what do? I take out my phone. What are the other options? Is there public transit? Well, no, the metro in Manila doesn't actually connect to the airport. So that's no help to me. I can't walk to it because it's almost 100 degrees outside. So, what are my other options? I can do a ride share. So, I can quickly look up what do I need to know about taking a ride share? What are the ride share options? And that took, maybe 5 minutes to find an answer. And the other thing you might be worried about is what if you get lost? What if you get overcharged if you're taking a taxi? Should you tip the driver? All these things that you don't even think about before you get there. But these questions start popping up, or these little bumps in the road. And so having a tool that can help you answer these questions and kind of overcome language barriers and currency confusion and all those things can be really helpful and just make you feel a lot more confident to show up somewhere that you've never been.
Can I have to say to listeners who are going like, "Oh my God," because that was my internal voice as you were speaking, is you don't have to learn everything all at once. And I'm sure Michelle started not knowing how to do any of this either. So yeah, we can tackle one app or one whatever it is at a time. Yeah, it's just like it all made so much sense. I'm one of these people that when I get to the airport, I've got the paper copy, I have got the whatever in the confirmation in my wallet. I've got a screenshot. I'm just so paranoid about what am I going to do. So I will relax now, having talked to you, and just use my phone. Now, you also talk about preparing our phone before travel. What does that entail?
Yeah, and that's a really good point that you just made. You don't have to know everything. I usually teach people there's just really four essential apps that I think everyone should get familiar with, no matter what country you're going to. So I'll touch on those real quick and we can come back to that if you want to. They are related to the
Yeah, no,
things
no,
to
that's yeah.
prepare. So Google Maps, or some kind of map if you have another map app that you prefer. Google Translate if you are going to a location where there's a different language. WhatsApp, that's a messaging app that can be used through Wi Fi or data plan. You don't have to use your own cell service from home. And a ride share, and we can talk about why I recommend that. So, some of the things that you want to do before a trip, and I do have a checklist that folks can download if that's something that you're interested in sharing. But the first thing is to make sure that you have a data plan. So, whether that's a SIM card or an eSIM, if you're going to another country, you want to make sure it's going to work internationally and not charge you an arm and a leg, right?
Right.
The next thing I do is download offline data for maps. So some people would say it's like downloading an offline map. This way, even if you get disconnected or you don't have Wi-Fi or you don't have a SIM card at all, you can still load the information of the map. You can basically see the map. You can see the points on the map, even if you don't have any connection whatsoever, because you've downloaded this data beforehand for the destinations where you're going. It helps too if you go into a rural area and the connection's not as good, you still are able to find that map information. Google Translate, you can get offline language apps or packs, I should say. So, again, if you're disconnected or just the Wi Fi is not very strong, you're still able to translate things. And if folks aren't familiar with the Google Translate app, it works pretty magically a few different ways. So you can kind of use it like through your camera. So in real life, if you hold up your phone camera to a sign that you can't read, it will translate it in real time and like flip those letters, into your home language. You can also use it in audio conversation. So if you're talking to someone, they're speaking another language and you're speaking English, you just kind of press play more or less, and it's able to translate for both of you, and you can read the translation in real time. So those are things that we have used. People, our homestay hosts, when we arrived in one town in Vietnam, they were on their Google Translate. They didn't speak any English. They're like, "Welcome, where are you from?" And in their language, and it speaks to us in English. So that can be very helpful. You mentioned already saving important confirmations. Printing is still great. If your phone runs out of battery by accident, maybe you want to have a paper copy as well. But I think taking screenshots, saving that important information offline is always helpful. The other big thing is adjusting your data settings on your phone. A lot of people don't do this, and it ends up using a lot more data than you need to. Because at home, you might have an unlimited plan. So you can, call, text, use the internet as much as you want. But when you go abroad, it's likely that your plan is not unlimited. And so you will be charged if you go over the amount of data. So if you're using Google Maps 24/7, that's using a lot of data because it's always pulling new information as you go. So there's some settings on your phone that you can adjust to automatically make sure that you're not using more than you need to, and to make sure that maybe you're going to be on free Wi-Fi whenever you want to use kind of, I call them data heavy apps, like things like video streaming, sending pictures. Those use a lot more data. So those are things that you want to do when you're on free Wi-Fi instead of your international plan. Another thing I like to do on Google Maps is pin locations where I want to go. So I can save those locations and see them visually on the map. And that way, if we're in a certain part of town, I can look and see, oh, there was a restaurant nearby that I thought would be interesting to go to, and we're pretty close to it. So let's do that. It helps us be a little bit more flexible with our itinerary. Setting up the rideshare apps, if you're going to use those, make sure that you have your account set up and your payment already set in the app so that you're not scrambling to do it at the airport where there may or may not be good Wi-Fi. And then, fun ones, if there's any entertainment that you want to watch on the plane, podcasts or anything like that, you want to download to your phone ahead of time. Make sure that you have your charger and cords packed. Those are easy little things to miss on the packing list. And then check your storage capacity because you're probably going to be taking a lot of pictures. So make sure that you have room on your phone. You're not going to have to, delete things at the last minute to make more space. So those are some of my prep tips.
I'll start with the last one. A year or so ago, I actually had my car hit while I was not in it, and I was trying to take pictures of the dent, the other person's driver's license. My photos were full, so it was like, oh my god, it's just one of those things. Fortunately, I was home and I could call my daughter out. But now I'm going to ask you a question, and this just will more reflect my naivety, but I will say that it happened many years ago, so I did have an excuse. Is I'm in Canada and I was crossing into the United States only to find that my smartphone was completely dead in the water, like just nothing. So came back to Canada a few days later, and boom, it all fired up and everything was great. I phoned my company and said, what's going on there? Well, you need this plan for the U.S. Okay, next time I bought it, crossed the border, dead, didn't work. So I guess where I'm going with this is do we need to check with our whoever we get or our phone service through to make sure that crossing international borders and things like that, we've still got service no matter what?
Yes. The default that people usually do is check with their home carrier, and everyone is different. I'm not sure why it wouldn't have worked in the US after they said that they set you up like that. But the other thing I would say nowadays is there are other options, and as long as you have a somewhat newer phone, not super new, but if it has the capability to use an eSIM, it's actually much cheaper, and there are plans that are regional or even global, so you wouldn't have to worry about crossing borders. And at least in the US, the difference between an international add on with your home carrier versus the data that you pay for with an eSIM, it's almost, I want to say, 6 times more expensive to go with the international add on with your home carrier. Obviously, that depends, but I know a lot of people default to that, but I would definitely encourage folks to consider, especially if you're traveling a lot and traveling between crossing a lot of borders, look into an eSIM if you can.
Do you know anything about, is it Starlink?
Starlink is the Wi-Fi from the Elon Musk company.
I believe it is, yeah, because apparently there's all these satellites that you can bounce off of. I talked to one nomad, and she was in the middle of some random field in the middle of, somewhere USA, and we had a perfectly good connection for our interview. My son has just recently traveled from Florida up to Seattle and used Starlink all the way along.
Yeah, I think it's a good option if you're in a vehicle, an RV, something like that, or maybe living abroad. I don't think it's quite as practical if you are traveling out of a suitcase, for example, because there actually is a hardware that you're going to need to carry around.
Oh, okay. Okay. The other thing with power is, once again, you never know how naive you are until somebody introduces you to something. I just got that from my daughter for Mother's Day, and it's the wireless power bank. And within a week, I messaged her and said, how have I lived without this thing? I cannot live without it because it holds a great charge. I can charge up any of my gadgets, in the car as I'm driving or whatever. Would you recommend one of those? Because it's not very big.
Definitely. Yeah, you're advanced of us because ours is not wireless, but I definitely recommend a, a power bank. So many people, we were traveling with some ladies in Vietnam recently, and because they are using their phone so much during the day, the maps and taking pictures and all those things, they don't realize how quickly their battery depletes when they're out and about. And they don't want to have to go back to the hotel and wait for 2 hours or whatever to plug it into the wall. So having something portable that you can fit in your backpack is really great idea.
And I get, yeah, with my phone at least, I get a number of charges off of this little tiny unit. So, now the other thing I was going to mention, because you were talking about being in some of these, whether it's Vietnam or the Philippines, is once you get out of the major areas, a lot of us would have said, well, what's the point? Nobody, with the apps, nobody has a phone. A friend of mine just spent an extended period in Bali and was in this little village at a market. And she took a picture of six little girls about 8 years old sitting on the curb, and they were all on their phones. So obviously, this technology is everywhere nowadays.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think folks would be surprised. I mean, in developing countries, people may not have computers at home, but it's very likely that they have a smartphone. It's a mini computer in the pocket, a little bit more affordable. There's a range of cost options out there. So that's definitely becoming more common. And the reason I mentioned WhatsApp, it's one of the most global apps that I've come across where in Europe, in South America, in Asia, even businesses are using WhatsApp to communicate. So if you're wondering if a business is open or you want to make a reservation at a restaurant, a lot of times they're going to be sharing their WhatsApp number on their website or their Facebook page. So that's the best way to get in contact with them. So I definitely recommend folks get familiar with WhatsApp. We use it also with friends and family at home because when we are abroad half the year, we can't receive texts to our home carrier number because we're abroad, right? We've turned that off basically. But we can still text and message through WhatsApp because it's using Wi Fi or whatever international data plan that we're on. And it keeps our same number actually. I can use my home number on WhatsApp without a problem. So it's definitely good to be familiar with. There's video calling, you can send pictures back and forth and messages, voice messages as well. So
Yeah, I will also vouch for WhatsApp. That's how my son communicates when he's roaming. And also, my son-in-law is Spanish, so they live here in Victoria. And in order to keep, in contact with the Spanish family more cheaply and send photographs of the grandchildren, all that stuff. Yeah, they live on WhatsApp. So yeah, really invaluable. That's great. Now I'm going to ask a question that may be totally out of your bailiwick, your wheelhouse, but I'll ask it anyways, just in case. I mentioned that my last phone crashed and burned. It was an iPhone. I was in Spain for a week and a half, and in the last few days, it would no longer charge. Now, obviously, I'd been using an adapter for the electricity. Mine was the only one in the group that died. Have you ever heard of that happening, or do you think it was just a failure of my phone?
I've not heard of that happening. I mean, I have heard of electronics dying quite a bit because folks don't have the adapter, right? It might work for a little bit, but I'm not an expert on that, but like the voltage or whatever is different, and so that can overpower electronics. Yeah, I wish I had a better
Yeah, no, no.
sense of
As I
that.
say, I didn't really think it was going to be in your wheelhouse, but it was one of those things that it's like, as I say, we become dependent on our phones now, especially when we're traveling internationally, and to suddenly like not be able to communicate if our group had split up or something like that, it was a little disconcerting. Obviously, I made it home okay. Now, you've mentioned some apps. Are there any other? Oh, I was going to actually ask you about the ride share. Now, is there a universal rideshare app so that whatever country you're in, you can connect with whatever rideshare company is local, or how does that work?
Unfortunately, there's not a universal app, so you do want to do some research for the region. There's a pretty common one throughout Europe. In the States, you have Uber and Lyft. I believe Canada also has both of those. In Southeast Asia, it's usually Grab, but they all work pretty similarly. So if you're familiar with the best practices, that will get you very far. And some of the reasons that I use rideshare more, I'll use Vietnam as another example because our friends who are well traveled showed up, and at the airport, they got a taxi. And when they were paying, the man used their lack of familiarity with the currency, because there's so many zeros on the Vietnamese dong, to say, "Oh, you only gave me 5,000 instead of 500,000. So you owe me more money." And there's things like that, these different scams, especially at the airport, because people are more vulnerable that aren't familiar, right? You showed up at the airport, you're probably new. It's probably your first time. And so you are just a little bit more vulnerable. So there's things like that. I've heard in Italy where the driver will, in the taxi, will just take you the longest way possible to run up the meter, right? And you have no idea where you're going. In the ride share, you can set up your credit card or a bank account ahead of time. It's going to tell you an estimation of the fare, which is pretty accurate before you even get in. It has different things in place, like you can see the driver's name, sometimes the picture, the license plate number, so you know that you're getting in the right car. And you can follow along on a map through the rideshare app, so you know that you're not getting too far off track. And if you are, you have the customer service of the rideshare company that you have a sense of accountability with them. If something goes wrong, you can report it. Then when you are paying, your credit card is already in there. You don't have to take out cash. You don't have to figure out the currency. And then the final thing, especially in Vietnam, we can barely speak Vietnamese. I've been there 7 times already, and I've done my best, but it is a tonal language. And if I try to speak, I'm probably going to say it, you know, mix up the words. It'll come out in, anyways.
Something rude.
Yeah. So being able to input the address where we're going straight into the app, there's no language barrier. That gets sent directly to the driver's phone. They know exactly where they need to go. So those are some of the reasons why I think it's really helpful to use rideshare, especially in a new place. So I definitely advocate that people try to get familiar with whatever app is common in the region that they're going to.
Yeah, so you can look up apps that are country specific then,
Mm-hmm.
depending on what you're doing or where you're going, that sort
Yeah,
of thing.
I would just do a web search for rideshare or ride hailing in city or country. Rideshare in Vietnam. And
Right.
it's going to tell you that Grab is the most common one.
Now, you mentioned banking, and that brought to mind when my youngest daughter, the one that's now married to the Spanish guy, she was 18 when she first went to Spain. She was living in Spain, took a weekend trip with another nanny to Portugal, got her banking ID stolen, and so they cleaned her out within days. They cleaned out her account, and it was really, well, nerve wracking as a mother, and she's only just finished high school, trying to get money to her. And what my bank, or both of our banks, recommended was that next time we set up a joint account that isn't usable on her debit card. So you're not accessible by the debit card. So that even if somebody has all the information, they can't get to that account. But if she goes into a bank and I can transfer money into that account, she can access it. Do you have any thoughts about banking?
Sure. I think I think that's a good point. I do use a an account specifically for ATM withdrawals that is separate from any of my other banks. So we put in, in blocks of $100 or $200 at a time. whatever we need to withdraw from the ATM. So that kind of limits what can be
Yeah.
withdrawn if something happens. The other thing is we use our international credit cards more often when we can, if it's not like a cash based society. And there's a lot more fraud checks naturally from the credit card companies. You know, they have their ways of detecting if you're maintaining your usual patterns of spending or whatever. But even in that case, you do want to have connection on your phone in case something does happen. Because if you get one of those, or if it triggers a fraud check and you are trying to purchase a train ticket for a train that's leaving in half an hour, you need to be able to either call them or they might automatically be trying to call you to verify, is are you who you say you are, and is this the purchase that you want to
Yeah.
make? So that's another reason why it is important these days to have some kind of connectivity and eSIM and international plan set up. But yeah, in terms of transferring money, I do think that is a good idea to have a separate account that only an ATM card can access, and maybe that's a joint account so that you can pull money from separate sources.
Someone
Yeah.
can get you money. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I sorry, this is great talking to you. I have all these asides. I did get a phone call many years ago asking me if I was trying to book a flight from New Zealand to, I don't even, can't remember where. And I'm going, I wish that was me. But
Yeah.
no, no, I'm here in Canada. Thanks for checking. So, yeah, I can see that you really want to be able to have those communications. Yes.
Well, and the other thing, because you brought that up, I do want people to be aware that there are quite a few scams going around. And my husband was contacted through a Facebook message that his cousin was supposedly traveling in London and got robbed. And could we, send him $1,000? And what my husband did was say, sure, I'd be happy to do that. Can you tell me where you went to kindergarten? And of course, this person had taken over his Facebook account and could not answer that. So just something to be aware of is that is a scam that can happen.
My most recent scam was, Mom, I've lost my phone. This is another number. Can you WhatsApp me here? Which is apparently the lead in. And when it happened to me, it was only a month or so ago, I messaged one of my other kids and said, has your brother lost his phone? Well, of course, they got on their phone. Hey, do you have your phone? Yeah, same thing. So I just ignored it. But my one thought was, yeah, if it was alleged to be a child in trouble, which is apparently the one, or grandchild that we older people get, is, to ask, how, I don't know, Josephine is doing, pretending that might be a partner or something. And of course, Josephine doesn't exist. So if they say, no, no, she's fine, she wasn't hurt in the accident or whatever, that,
Hmm.
it's fake because Josephine is totally fictitious. So yeah, just being prepared, I guess, with those those responses. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that one up. You have a talking point: tricks to make travel much smoother, cost effective, and enjoyable. Tell us what those tricks are.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it's what we've already talked about in terms of using our smartphones wisely. So making the most of the powerful tool that it is so it doesn't get the better of us, because it really does give us the ability to have confidence in unfamiliar places and open doors that might not have been there before. And you don't need to be a computer whiz or an expert phone guru, but just invest in yourself a little bit, because smartphone skills can really pay off on all of your future trips and even at home. And we talked about it doesn't have to be overwhelming. You don't have to learn all the apps. If you can focus on the four that I mentioned: Google Maps, Google Translate, WhatsApp, and a rideshare, I really think that those four are going to make the biggest difference if you don't do anything else. Just starting with those, getting familiar, using them, practicing with them, learning what the best practices are, those are going to help you connect better with people, especially with like Google Translate. You're going to be able to have conversations or ask questions and get answers. You're going to be able to make sure if there's a sign at the above your parking spot that it doesn't say, like don't park here today. You're not going to get, tickets, get yourself in a hole. Yeah, and then Google Maps I use so much for trip planning, even as much as I do when I'm actually traveling. I end up doing a lot of my research and finding kind of hidden gems that I wouldn't normally come across just because I'm looking at the map to see what's out there and I'm using search filters that are in the map to kind of narrow down all the different attractions or restaurants that might be a good fit for us. Yeah, I think just taking it to the next level, you don't have to do everything all at once, but just taking one more step can really be a big step towards making travel more smooth and enjoyable for you.
Well, as you're saying that too, I'm thinking it's going to be more enjoyable for your passengers. I was thinking when I was doing road trips with my kids a whole bunch of years ago, is they each had their own paper map. And my only rule was that if there's something you want to see or do, you have to give me time to turn on my turn signal and hit the brakes.
Love it.
But these days, I'm sure when my kids now are traveling with their kids, the kids are going to be on Google Maps saying, "Oh, hey, there's this attraction here, and then there's this the whatever over there," and they can actually make sure that they get to wherever they want to see. Or if there's a clump of attractions, definitely make their way over to that part of a town or a state or whatever. So yeah, yeah, it's interesting as the generations progress. That's great.
Yeah.
Um, is there anything else that you think mid-age women should consider before going global? And one thing I was thinking about is you had mentioned listening to Gila's interview, her second interview, and she was talking about an app where she travels alone, and I would be traveling alone, where she can ping herself or whatever. So her children know where she is whenever she's out of the car in a maybe a more remote spot. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, I can't remember what exactly that app is, but I've heard quite a few single women really enjoy or appreciate having that capability. There's another way to do it also. If you have an iPhone, there's kind of a built-in service called Find My. So you can find your devices if you set those up. If you get like an Apple AirTag, the little tiny, it's like a size of a quarter, and you can put it in your backpack or your suitcase and track that. So as long as you're with your phone, you could give someone else permission to find my phone. So my parents used this when they were traveling with my uncle because he likes to wander off. And they would never know where he was. So he gave them permission to find his phone, and that way they could pull up a map and see him as a little dot moving around. So you can give that same permission to someone who's at home, even if you're in another country. So there are there are ways to do that, and I definitely recommend it if you're traveling solo.
Apparently, car theft is so common now that I know a lot of people are putting those Apple AirTags in their vehicles. Not
Hmm.
not that it necessarily helps, but it's the kind of strange as you see it on a ship going to a faraway country. But
Yeah, it's interesting because it doesn't necessarily save your suitcase or your car from getting stolen, but at least you know where it is, and it
yeah.
really does make a big difference. We've lost our luggage twice on international trips, and it took 8 days once and 10 days another time to get our luggage back from us. And you're trying to call customer service to hear where get these updates, and it's kind of a nightmare. Because they don't answer the phone. You can't talk to a person. So just knowing where your things are, if they might be getting closer to you or not, makes a big difference.
Well, I think too that Something like that. I hope it becomes more and more common because I've heard the stories where the suitcase has gone missing. The owner of the suitcase is talking to customer service and says, "Okay, like my air tag says it is in this exact location," and they're going, "No, that can't be right." And it's like, but so, perhaps that service, the airline service counter has never heard of it or isn't used to the power of it. But hopefully, as it becomes more and more common and more people are using the tags, that it's like, okay, you've just helped us out. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
So now I sort of led you down that path, but is there anything else that you think midlife women should consider before going global?
Can't really think of anything. We've had the pleasure to meet quite a few single retired women travelers recently, and they each have their own style of travel. So there was one woman from Canada who visited us while we were in Vietnam, and she was mostly staying in hostels, and she was using Hostel World as kind of a network to meet up with people. And that's something that I typically think of a younger crowd would, staying in hostels are usually like the warm bunk beds with a bunch of strangers, but she would get a private room. But it was a good way for her to connect with people in each place. The other folks that we met are, traveling together as two single women, often traveling together. One of them does most of the planning, the other one keeps the finances and the purse, and tells the other one when it's time to put more in the purse. But they had a great time as a pair and have just enjoyed traveling to many different countries together, which I think is awesome. And obviously, people are traveling as couples as well. But yeah, I think just make the most of it because there's no perfect time to travel, right? They talk about the different generations. When you're young, you might be physically mobile and capable, but maybe you don't have a whole lot of money or opportunity to travel. When you're raising a family or in a career, you might not have a whole lot of time. But as you're retiring, you get the time and you might have some money left over. But even if you don't, there's ways to do it on a budget. But just make the most of those years while you can because I think they really add enrichment to your life.
And apparently, learning new languages is a really good way to keep the brain active. Okay, that's perhaps a really good segue into. I'm looking at my other monitor over here in case you're wondering. Your resources. You've got a ton of stuff on your website. Can you tell us about your resources? I actually just I sent the link to my son like a couple of hours ago. It was just I couldn't believe all the stuff that was here.
Sure. So I started putting together a whole toolkit of online tutorials for travelers. I started with a course called Google Maps Travel Hacks because when we were in Vietnam a few years ago, we had been visited by another retired traveler, and she was looking at my phone and said, "Oh, it looks like you have all these pins on your map. What are you doing with those? I've never, used Google Maps in that way." And it kind of was an aha moment to me that, oh, this is something I've been doing as long as I've had my phone, and comes maybe second nature to me, but not to everyone. And so Google Maps Travel Hacks is helping you put together a custom itinerary for yourself, even if you've never been to the destination before, through these ways that I use Google Maps to research and kind of save and plan. The next one I did is called Worldwide Connectivity. So, staying connected online, managing your data usage so you don't waste money on international phone plans or roaming fees. And then I did Book Better Flights, which teaches my step by step process for researching flights, cutting through the clutter, right? There's so many options out there. But when you're researching plane tickets, how to quickly find those best itineraries and deals. And then Smartphone Savvy Travel is a course that really teaches those four essential smartphone apps that we talked about and the best practices. So if someone is maybe beginning with their smartphone or feels like they want to level up just a little bit, that's going to help them hit the ground running in a new place with less stress and uncertainty. And then my latest course, which is coming out next week, is teaching the tricks to efficiently find accommodation gems that are within your budget and the preferences that you have, so you can find the right fit for you and not have disappointing stays. So those are all bite-sized, pre-recorded, so they're on demand. You don't have to show up for class at a certain time, but there's step-by-step guidance and lesson transcripts if you prefer to read, and they'll just kind of walk you through the skills that you need to know. And then if you are interested in all of them, I have basically a toolkit subscription, so you can get all of that at once, as well as our other tips and destination resources. So
Yeah, I was looking at like, oh, you've got a whole bunch of recommendations, whether it's insurance or like trusted house sitters. I know about that, Kayak Explore, like all those things that it's like, oh, I better check that out. Oh, I better check that out. And even gear by the looks of it. You got a backpack here, all sorts of
yeah, we've
stuff.
we've tried a
So,
lot of things over the years, so we try
yeah.
to share what we've learned.
Well, and that's why it's good to because you've been doing this for a number of years, is to check your resources out and go, this is obviously going to work because with your travel experience, you're recommending it. That's great. Where do we find you on the World Wide Web?
Our site is intentionaltravelers.com. That's travelers with one L. And we're also, of course, on Facebook, Instagram, a little bit on YouTube. Yeah.
Okay. I, yeah, I was going to ask about personal, but you've or social. You've just done that. May I ask you a personal question before we close?
Yes.
You and Jedd were with the Peace Corps in Jamaica in
Uh-huh.
2012 to 14. Was that right after Hurricane Sandy? And actually, I was just going to ask you what the Peace Corps was. What was it like? You said a little bit about getting to know different culture, that sort of thing.
Let me look up Hurricane Sandy real quick. Because we had a hurricane while we were there, but it didn't actually hit. Yeah, 2012. I guess that was the one. It was so uneventful where we were. So we
Oh,
sat
okay.
out. We sat with our host family and were waiting for it, but it was just wind where we
Oh,
were.
the reason I
Yeah.
asked is just, and I do want to know a little bit more about Peace Corps, but um, with this last one that happened in July, whatever the president, the governor, whatever, said that Jamaica coped better with Hurricane Beryl because of all of the rebuild, the quality of the rebuild after Hurricane Sandy. So I was wondering
Okay.
if you had been part of that rebuild, but if you're on a different part of the island, you were one of the lucky ones.
Oh. Yeah, I was placed in a rural school, so I was doing literacy for grades 1 through 4, pulling kids out of class to do tutoring. And then my husband was assigned to a brand new community center in the town that we were close to. And so he helped them set up a internet cafe, some youth programs, and then he did classes for senior citizens on the computer because so many families in Jamaica have family members who have moved to the States or to England or to Canada. And so these folks wanted to stay in contact with their sons and daughters, and send pictures and things like that, but they didn't know how to do that yet. So that was one of the classes that he taught. Um, yeah, it was definitely challenging. The tagline is the toughest job you'll ever love, and that is very fitting, but it really, you don't learn without challenge, right? And so we just learned so much about ourselves and the world, and yeah, I could go on and on.
Oh, that's great. And is it mostly for young people, or is there a complete age range of volunteers?
There's an age range. You have to be a college graduate or have a certain number of out or years of expertise in your field. So the youngest is, 21, 22, and it is common for people to do it out of college. We were around 30 when we did it, and then the next in our group was about 55. There were some 60-year-olds, and that's when we first realized that we connect a lot more with the older crowd than the younger crowd, which is still true because as we travel, we end up in places where retirees congregate, or we connect with boomers as we're traveling a lot because they have the time and the flexibility like we do. So
Right. I
yeah,
actually have a page on my website that is all about philanthropy and like different companies that you can deal with, depending on what your interests are or where you want to go or what you want to do. In terms of, you know, us, our age group getting involved, it's
yeah,
such a great experience.
it's a great opportunity. If you're retiring, we had friends who did it twice as retirees. They were both educators, and they did their first 2 years in China, and I think they extended for a third year, and then they came to Jamaica and did 2 more years. And that's how we met them. So,
Oh, that's great. Thank you. I was just curious what it was like.
yeah.
Okay, your website link is in the show notes, and all the links are on your page at our website. Listeners, are you feeling a little wiser now? Hopefully, not intimidated. I'd love to hear your travel experiences or travel hacks. Leave comments where you're listening, or if you're listening at boomwithabang.com, scroll to the bottom of the page and talk to us there. There's always the possibility I didn't ask Michelle the burning question you had about travel and smartphones. Ask it in the comments and I'll get you an answer. I'll make my usual request for 5 stars and a review. Takes but a minute at Apple, and the algorithm goddesses like them. Share this episode. Post COVID, many of us are longing to get back to international travel. But tales of inconvenience are not uncommon. When you share this episode, you may be doing your friends a huge favor if they ever have issues in a distant land. I write out this part of my closing outro, but just thinking that listening to what you've been saying, it'll make it so much better while they're traveling too. They don't even need an issue. They just, yeah, it'll be great. You've also heard me invite you to buy me a coffee, a cheap option given my taste in coffee. You can also subscribe to buy me a coffee each month, and that gives you some age specific perks. That link is in the show notes and above Michelle's head on her page at our website. A lot of you are on Substack. You can follow me there too. Michelle Chang, thank you for being my guest today. As I explored your website, I really did feel that I'll be more prepared when I get back to traveling. I'm just gonna, it's it's a fabulous rabbit hole, shall I put it that way?
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. Have a great rest of the week.